Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Truth Cold Case Missing. This is episode 5. Now, at the end of episode 4, I did promise that I would go into the remainder, I think, of Taj's day and the weeks and months and years to follow, really, and start going into what had been done during the investigation and things that we had learned. But as I put up posts on Facebook, as I do these videos, I'm getting a lot of messages and different responses to what I post up there, questions, suggestions, and all of that. I appreciate it so much. As I was mentioning in a previous episode, however, that when you have, now that we have social media and now that we have all these investigations online, it really brings a lot of things forth that I think come from a lack of understanding or acknowledgement of cases and where they are now as compared to where they used to be. And what I want to share today is really something, or the things that I had to learn as I began, not only in the Taj case, but looking at different cases that were unresolved, that were cold, that had no answers. And that is the difference between investigations of years ago and investigations today, and the technological advancements that we have that weren't there 40, 50 years ago, some a little less, some more. I want to just talk about that because I think it's very important when we talk about present, or we're in the present talking about these older cases, where our minds are at and how we respond to it. So Taj's case is 44 years old. It is hard to imagine. It was 22 years old when I took it. And like I said, as I began reading through the case, as I began understanding the case and finding different things in the case, it began to get frustrating for me. I'll be honest about it, as any case, any cold case is. And I think any investigator would tell you that you have to come to that understanding with how things were done. So the advancements we're talking about back, in the 80s, fingerprints were huge and interviews were huge. Record keeping was manual, wasn't on a computer. Where today, now we have DNA evidence and we have phones, computers. We can analyze that stuff when we're looking for missing children, missing people. We have databases like CODIS and NamUs. NamUs being really the clearinghouse for missing people. You can go in there, you can create an account online, go into NamUs, search a name, search Taj Narbonne. Look what's under his name. But more importantly, in the early 2000s, when I began Taj's case, we retrieved something that would provide his DNA. And his DNA was extracted from that item. It wasn't case related, so to speak, that item. It wasn't a piece of evidence from that case. But his DNA was able to be extracted and entered into the University of North Texas President's DNA Initiative at the time. We also submitted his mother, Annette's DNA. She voluntarily gave her DNA to us. And that information that was at the University of North Texas got forwarded over to NamUs. So I answered a question the other day on Facebook. I might have mentioned this previously about bones being found in Massachusetts, and smaller bones. The person thinks about, when they hear that, they think about Taj, and so do I. I think about Taj. I think about a lot of different missing child cases when I hear that bones have been recovered and sent out to be analyzed. So yes, his DNA is out there, and that's substantial. That's one thing that we have now that we did not have in the future. And that falls under the forensic science. Just was not a standard forensic tool then, they were working on it, but it wasn't used for criminal cases. Digital evidence. This is major. This is a major advancement that we have now that we did not have then. When a crime occurs now, when a child runs away or a child goes missing under suspicious circumstances, we have digital evidence that becomes a major focus of investigations. We're talking about computers, phones, social media. We're talking about CCTV, cameras up. A lot of people now have cameras on their homes, especially within neighborhoods. All you have to do is look around, see who has cameras on their houses. Doesn't matter if you're going down a main road or you're walking into a mall or to a bank or to a school, anywhere. But if you leave one location in today's world, it doesn't matter which way you go, the chances of a camera going to be there is pretty good. Of course, there's limitations to surveillance cameras, and that's usually how long they're going to be saved for. How long is that media that's on there going to be saved for? I think it's usually 30 days, but it's probably based on the settings. But when we talk about computers or phones, we talk about locations, we talk about searches that are on those items as well. GPS, if a person has not turned off their GPS on their phone. But there's so much information to focus on and who the person's been talking to. We see that all the time in today's world. Well, a person was talking to someone in New Mexico or someone in Colorado or wherever, and right, we heighten the investigation and where to look based on that information that's been taken through digital evidence. And then social media is also a key factor in today's world that they did not have 40 years ago. It just was not there. So investigations were done differently, and it was really a lot of groundwork and relying on basic evidence and how people reported it via witnesses. There's nothing there in the Taj case, like many other missing children cases. Any of the sightings of Taj were unsubstantiated. So he did not show up at Fallbrook School. We know that. Any other places that he was cited locally were not found to be credible. That's difficult to say, because then a witness says, well, you're calling me a liar. No. It may be a false memory. It may be something that a witness hoped that they saw someone or thought that they saw someone. I'm just saying that whatever came out of those statements back then were not substantiated. So when you have a case where you say a person was never seen from or heard again, that's where you get that. And again, maybe Taj talked to somebody a couple days later. Maybe he showed up someplace and had a conversation with someone. That's just never been forwarded to us, and we've never talked to someone who has said that. Again, frustration. I just recently got not a lot, but I got some information that I had not heard of before. I think it was a sighting, and asked this person to ask another person if they would be willing to talk to me. And it seems like that person does not want to. So even though that person made a comment and has allegedly seen some activity or whatever, they simply do not want to come forward. And I cannot force them to come forward as a private investigator. I cannot force them to come forward if I was still a police officer. It's just how it is. The And the investigative techniques themselves, like I said, they relied on interviews, relied on going to, people's houses, people's jobs, talking to family members, etc. And now today, yes, victims, witnesses, all of that stuff is still very crucial. But what we have on top of that today is looking at, like I said, social media, looking at digital forensics and all of that stuff. We can trace a person's movement, but not all the time, right? Not all the time. Some people just go off the radar and disappear. But in most situations, and you'll see a lot of murders that go on where a suspect is caught on camera following a victim, or there a couple days earlier, or outside a person's home or place of work. All right, so we can trace back what a person has done. Couldn't do that in 1980, 1981. That's different. And then communication. Our lines of communication today are so much better, even within law enforcement. That's not to say that 40 years ago, law enforcement did not work together, but we work together better today than we did then. It's not a slap, it's just the truth. Communication was more limited back then. Even police radios were more limited. Other departments didn't hear you. It was more, the one-on-one, very limited type communication. Everything was via phone call. It was not, right, on email. If you needed to get a photo of someone, it came snail mail. Any reports also came snail mail. Slow. No emails, no fax machines, nothing like that. So there is more collaboration today than there has been in the past. Most cases start with a local police department, and then you can move on, if needed, to the state police, Massachusetts State Police. If you need the assistance beyond that of local search and rescue teams, you can do that. In Leominster, for instance, the Leominster Police Department, you have Massachusetts State Police C4 barracks right there that would assist. You have another large department next door, Fitchburg, that could assist in a search. You have your Leominster Emergency Management. You have your local search teams. Central Mass Search and Rescue is one of them. And you can get those organizations moving with one phone call. That's how much it has changed. What happens in today's world is that we don't understand, when we look at a case and we review a case, especially from the outside looking in, we don't know all the information, and we start to speculate that searches didn't happen, or people weren't spoken to, places weren't searched, or I just had a great question. There is discussion about something new going on the old Leominster dump, a horse race track and gambling and entertainment, whatever it is. And they said, I hope when they begin to build on that site that they excavate it to look for Taj. Because if Taj was disposed of in something and brought to the dump, which was the dump at our time, then that is the opportunity to look at that dump. That is unrealistic without an extremely specific location. That's just being honest. The chances of the city of Leominster's dump, old trash landfill, whatever you want to call it, excavating that entire site, without knowing if a person is there or where they are is slim to none. That is not being, when I say that, I don't say that in a mean way. I'm saying that in a realistic way. I know for a fact that even if they go and start doing some excavation there for purposes of foundations or whatever it may be, I'm not saying that that is going there. I'm just saying if a person or a company began excavating there for specific purposes, they would have to go down an incredible amount of distance, of feet, before they even got to where trash once was. That landfill had been being filled with various material, various clean earth and whatnot to cap it, all done by law. Yes, there were pipes put in for methane, and there's a methane building and whatnot there through the years. I don't even know if it gets enough methane to keep that building going, however that process works. But I can't even guess as to how deep you would have to go to get to that point where they were at that location in 1981. I like the idea, I like the thought process. If there were evidence that that was a possibility, then certainly we would have entertained that. Or when I say we, I'm talking about investigators from the 80s would have entertained that then. That's when the time would have been to do so. So we often think of things, we want things to happen in that format, like thinking today this is what we should do, but not realizing that, well, we're talking about 44 years ago in a landfill that's been filled and capped and whatnot, and there's a lot of depth before you even get to that point of 1981. So I just ask, and I want you to understand that there are differences, that people have been spoken to. That was a major part of our reinvestigation beginning in 2003, was that we talked to people again, people that had been spoken to or that had never been spoken to, and there were numerous people that had never been spoken to. We talked to them, and we talked to people again to ask questions that were never asked, or get something that they believe or they know, whatever it was. We did that. As far as searches go, we had a list of places that we wanted to look at that were also completed. That's stuff we can do now with better technology now, and that process is still happening, and it will continue to happen as long as the case continues to move. So I wanted to just take this time to share with you that there are differences between then and now. If a case happened 2 years ago, even I would be saying, why wasn't this area searched? But just keep in mind, when we're talking about old cases, unresolved cases, that there is a big difference. And as I had mentioned before, even in police writing, even in the quality of writing and how things were written, and how now, if you read a police report, it would be all factual, where police reports years ago weren't always factual. Some of it was opinion, or they'd go off onto certain paths. And again, this is in different reports, whether it's a crime or a missing person. So much has changed, and so much has changed for the better. We can't look backwards. We have to look forward when we work these cases, and we have to learn all we can learn to continue in a forward direction with cases. And we've been doing that. It's been a long 22 years since that reinvestigation, but we have made incredible strides, even though we don't have a resolution. We continue to work, and we always will. Episode 6, I will go into Taj's case more. I promise you that. And that's going to be coming out right after you watch this. So thank you for the support. Hit like and subscribe. Share if you'd like. I appreciate all of your support. Thank you.